everybody? Happy Sunday. Well, we're in the afternoon now. Just less than 60 minutes away from the kickoff times here for the 1 o'clock games, Joe. Yesterday we did our pick'em segment, and we both picked the hometown Detroit Lions to open up their homestand here with a win today against the Los Angeles Chargers. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this game, get your opinion on some things, and then we should have it wrapped up plenty of time before the game kicks off. So once we go through our bit, only thing left to do is watch the game and see how things unfold. So to kick things off here, Joe, I'm just going to go over who we have listed as inactives for both teams. Starting with the Lions inactives. And I won't bury the lead like the Lions did when they tweeted out their image. They had two guys who aren't as important up top, so we'll dig into the meat of it. Taylor Decker is going to be inactive for today. Gerard Davis inactive. Deshaun Hand inactive. Travis Fulgham, Amani Owarie, Bo Benschwella, the backup guard, and then David Blau, our third QB. Those were they had Bo and Blau as the first two guys listed there, and then had everyone else. I definitely think Gerard Davis, Taylor Decker, and Deshaun Hand being out of this game, those are the three big injuries. With Taylor Decker being out, it's going to be interesting to see who the Lions start at left tackle. And let's start there, Joe. Obviously, Taylor Decker is coming off a poor game last week against the Arizona Cardinals. He's dealing with a back injury, so even if he was to play in this game, it would be a bit of a concern. You look at the pass rushers for the Los Angeles Chargers. You have Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, two very good pass rushers. They don't have a whole lot of depth behind them, and they have some injuries there that are hurting their depth, but those two guys alone are two pass rushers who can give you a lot of headaches. So it was going to be iffy if Taylor Decker was going to play anyways, but now they're going with a backup. I'm not sure if they're going to end up going with Crosby or if maybe they're going to try and move Kenny Wiggins over there. They got to figure out who they're going to have there starting at left tackle. Joe, do you think that could be a problem today for the Lions?
Definitely could be a problem. Last week we saw struggles at left tackle from Taylor Decker, and he faced fairly decent opponents, last week. But the same thing goes with every player in the NFL. If you want to make it in this league, you have to perform. And when a starter goes down, it gives you the opportunity to play well. And if you play well against the type of competition that the Chargers are going to present today, it's going to, reevaluate, who might be the starting left tackle. So you can say it could be a very big problem if, they struggle at that position for the backup. But say we get a surprise and that the backup comes in and plays well, all of a sudden you take into account, you're like, okay, well, now it's going to be a position battle for weeks to come. So it's going to be an evaluation period for the left tackle today, definitely.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, they have the ability to, like you said, they'll be a backup coming in and maybe they'll perform well. I think they also need to adjust the game plan a little bit and take into consideration the fact that Matt Stafford's blind side isn't going to be as well protected as it could be. And I think the play calling needs to be adjusted accordingly. Obviously, you brought in Danny Amendola, you got T.J. Hawkinson, you have Jesse James, you have outlets that can do shorter passes. You have people that you can dunk it off to and let them go make a play. I think that's what the Lions are going to need to do because, game one against the Cardinals, they did not have a very good, Taylor Decker was giving up a lot of pressure. You got to get the ball out of Stafford's hands quickly and get it into the playmakers' hands and give them a chance to make a play. What I hope to see out of Darrell Bevell, especially with this injury, is to take that into consideration and get the ball into Amendola's hands, get the ball to Kerryon Johnson out of the backfield. Don't try and always do like a 5-step drop because you're not going to have time with Bosa and Ingram coming at you against a depleted offensive line to do those more traditional longer drop back passes and try and get the ball down the field.
See, that's what I really enjoyed about watching the Lions offense in week one was that they were actually able to complete, 5, 10, 15-yard plus passes, not those dump offs that we see, last few seasons where it's, at the line of scrimmage. That really got me feeling good about Stafford as quarterback being able to throw the ball down the field and not just throwing it to an out where the player has to make a play to gain yards. So you saying that they're going to have to change that game plan and go back to that is kind of something I hope they're able to avoid, and they're able to continue like last week, throwing the ball down the field, because that was definitely refreshing, coming out in 5 wide receiver sets, doing a short little play fake, to the running back and then being able to throw the ball downfield. That's what got me more engaged into the game and felt good about the Lions offense. If they're just dumping it off again, I don't feel like they're going to be able to make as many yards in the passing game.
Yeah, I think certainly. I think they'll need to go for a mix. I don't think you'll obviously. Last week there were quite a few plays that were 20-plus yards down the field. I don't think you'll be able to stretch it out quite as far, or maybe not as often in this game. But there's no reason why you can't have Danny Amendola run a crossing route, 5 yards down the field, hit him with the ball, let him go for, if you're getting 5 yards of completion, you can certainly march the ball down the field. And as soon as you start hitting those quicker passes, it helps Stafford get into rhythm. It might get that defensive line to back up a little bit or get them tired out. And so I think there's certainly some ways to do it. And I think a big thing that's going to need to happen in this game to help out that passing attack for the Lions is Kerryon Johnson getting going on the ground. Obviously in week one, didn't have the most impressive outing, didn't accumulate a whole lot of yards, didn't really help the Lions move the ball too much. So I think he's going to be important here in week 2 against the Chargers to get him going early. Taking a look at the Chargers side of things, people that they have out, their kicker Michael Badgley, he's out. They got Roderick Teamer, Michael Davis, who's one of their starting corners, Jatavius Brown, Hunter Henry, Cortez Burton, and then they also have a backup QB, Easton Stick, who's inactive for today. So I think the big things for the Chargers side of things is almost one player who's missing from the inactive list. That's Mike Williams. He's their number 2 receiver. He's been questionable throughout the week, but he will be a go here today for the Chargers. So a bit of good news there for Phillip Rivers and the Chargers fans, especially losing Hunter Henry for this game. He'll still have at least one of his weapons available to him today. And bit of good news for the Lions. Michael Davis, one of their starting corners, out with a hamstring injury. So just like last week where some of the starters for the Cardinals were out in that secondary, you have Michael Davis who will be missing this game, but you also have their safety, and his name's escaping me at the moment. He was a rookie last year, but he was something James. I think it's Irwin James, maybe. He had a fantastic season last year. Derwin James, not Irwin. Derwin James is their safety who's out. So you're missing him already, and he's by far their best guy in the secondary. You're missing Mike Davis, the starting corner. I think there's going to be some opportunities for the Lions to move the ball through the passing game if they can give Stafford the time to get the ball out. So with all that being said, Joe, what do you think here is going to be the key for a Lions victory today? Obviously, we both chose them to win. We think there's a good chance they can do so. To you, what is really going to be the thing that clinches this game for the Lions?
Not letting up mentally, playing a complete football game. I think we saw points in week 1 where the Lions offense looked really good. The Lions defense looked kind of good, but they didn't play a complete football game. They kind of let up. There was a point in the third quarter where they started running the ball more, like out of character of what we've seen all game, giving them the lead. It's like you're trying to run time off the clock early in the second half or in the second half. I mean, to me, I think that, there's too much complacency to think, okay, we have this big lead. They've been playing terrible all game, and they're not going to be able to do anything. So we'll just, walk through the rest of this game. I think it's important to be competitive for a full 60 minutes on the field. And I think it's important if you go to a game plan standpoint. I think last week we saw Eckler, who takes place of Melvin Gordon, have a big game. And of course, Phillip Rivers on your on offense as a quarterback is the number 8th all time in passing yards or whatever, and that proves that he's veteran. He can get the job done. He's going to move the ball. I think you have to game plan for having your defense shut down the run, shut down the pass, play a better complete football game for 60 minutes, create turnovers, and just disturb the flow of the Chargers. The Lions are going to be at home, and they're going to be able to feed off the crowd's energy like we saw in Arizona. They were booing at halftime, and then, you get a little bit of excitement going, and then all of a sudden you have the crowd support. They're all cheering. You're feeding off that momentum. So it being the home opener, everybody's going to be excited to go to the Ford Field and see a Lions game. So I think you have to feed off the energy and play competitive football for a complete 60 minutes. The Lions offense plays like they did last week, not a problem. If the defense plays better and plays for 60 minutes, then it's going to look favorable for the Lions to get the W.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see which Lions team we see here today. Obviously, the Lions for the first 3 quarters of that game against the Cardinals were a very good team. To your point, they were very much in control throughout it. So certainly if they can perform at that level again this week, certainly a good opportunity for them to come out victorious here today. But if they're more so that team that we saw in the fourth quarter, it's going to be more of a struggle. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come out. And to your point, Joe, I think it is important. You saw the line sort of shift what they were doing. Obviously, they had that turnover on the punt, and that's sort of where things started to turn. And the Lions at that point switched from being aggressive to being more of a prevent style of play. They stopped doing the same things they were doing on offense, as well as taking a more preventative approach on defense. And I think this week, for them to be victorious, I think they need to, if they are ahead, they need to stay aggressive. Don't back off and try and like what you've been doing has got you the lead in the game. I don't think you take your foot off the gas pedal and try and switch it up and go to a prevent thing when you've been so successful earlier through the game. So I think that's going to be a crucial thing for them. If they do get ahead, I want to see them stay aggressive throughout the game and not switch to a more passive prevent style, because I think that's really what hurt them last week against the Cardinals. They sort of had that shift of, all right, let's protect the lead instead of, all right, let's come out here and win the game. They thought they already had it won. They were trying to hold on to it. I think they got to be more aggressive and keep that let's go win the game mentality instead of let's hold on to our lead. Of course, this is kind of an interesting week for the Lions. This is only week 2 of the season. The Lions have a very tough schedule coming up. Their next 4 games, they're at Philadelphia, then they're home against the Chiefs, then they're at Green Bay, and then home against the Vikings. Joe, if they lose this game today, they would be 0-1-1 and have that tough schedule ahead of them where there's no gimme games. Their gimme game was last week and they tied it. They should have a good chance here against the Chargers today. The Chargers are a good team, but I still like the Lions on paper over them. Those next 4 games are all going to be rough. In your mind, can the Lions, should they lose today, can the Lions season survive having to go on that brutal 4-game stretch?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it'll take the pressure off them. I think the pressure was on them to win week 1, and everybody's talking about these tough teams. And, if they don't start off well, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to win the division. Even if they lose today and go 0-1-1, I think it takes the pressure off them to win the division, to make the playoffs, and they just think to themselves, all right, now we can just go out there, play football, and have fun. And I think that they'll play better that way than than having to feel the pressure from the fans to do well. I think that being predicted to finish so low in overall win-loss record, basically if they lose, they're just like, okay, what do we have to lose? We're not picked to make the playoffs. We don't have a NFC North division win, that people are predicting. So what do we have to lose? Why not just go out there, give it our all, have fun, and put together the best game we can, and it'll take pressure off if they lose this week. But, they're definitely going to be disappointed that they tied that game. And I think they'll be able to survive win or loss, but they're definitely going to feel motivated to come out stronger and to play a full game of football rather than, just kind of letting the Chargers take control of the game and have their way with the Lions. I don't really see that happening. I see the Lions being more of a competitive team in this game. If they lose, they're going to have the mentality of, what else do we have to lose? We're the Lions. We're playing these good teams. Let's make a statement. It's any given Sunday. I think that, the Lions can beat any team in this league. They could win all the rest of their games. They're not a terrible team, and they're not the best offensive or defensive ranked team with the players and the paper and everything. But I do think they have the ability to beat any team in the league. They also have the ability to lose to any team in the league. So it's a give or take.
Yeah, certainly. I think there isn't as big of a gap between the Lions and some of the other teams in the league at the moment. These aren't the Lions that went 0-16 or 1-15 the next season. They're not that far behind the rest of the NFL. So I do think it is something where they can, any of these games they could potentially win. I think obviously you're going to have your favorites in those games. Like, they could beat the Chiefs. It could happen. I think the Chiefs are certainly the favorites, but it is going to be interesting to see what happens, because realistically, if you want to make the playoffs, you kind of have to get to that 10-win mark. And taking a look, we talked about it last week, Joe. Even though they tied the Cardinals and it's not a loss, it was kind of a loss because a loss by subtraction. You were subtracting what should have been a win towards that 10-win mark you're going for, and that hurts. Taking a look at the rest of the schedule this season, it starts to get hard, because if they do. We talked about it earlier, ESPN projecting us to come out the gate and start 0-11. I don't think that's going to happen for the Lions, but if some of that rings true in that 4-game stretch, they do go 0-4 during that, you really have to start looking at the rest of the schedule and seeing where you can pick up wins. And it does become an issue. So, I'm not doom and gloom on the Lions by any means. Of course, like I said, we both think they're going to win this game against the Chargers today, so I don't want to be too gloomish about it, but it is something to keep an eye on, because these are two games where we thought they can come in, get victories. If they don't get them, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out the rest of the season, just because, again, really you want to be in that 10-win area to feel confident that you'll make the playoffs. But I guess an important question for you, Joe, is, in your opinion, what will it take for the Lions to be successful this season? I think really from a fan standpoint, we just want to see them be competitive, and really, the outcomes of the game are going to be what they're going to be. But if the Lions don't make the playoffs, can they still have a successful season, in your opinion, if they were to miss the playoffs this year?
I think the biggest thing for the season is not looking at total win-loss. It's looking at what's happening in the division. This week, I know Green Bay and Minnesota play. One of those teams is going to lose. They're going to be 1-1. The Bears, if they win, they'll be 1-1. We'll have two teams being 1-1. If the Lions win, they'd be 1-0-1 and automatically be in second place in the division. So that's something that the loss doesn't do for you. It doesn't put you, at the loss notch on your column. I think that they don't have to concern themselves with win total, playoff total, the NFC total. I think if they just focus on the division, winning divisional games, and of course, winning football games, I think it gives them a better opportunity. They could very well, not win 10 games, but yet still win the division if they, go undefeated in the division. So there's many ways to have a successful season if it's not the most win percentage season the Lions could have. But if they don't make the playoffs, it's still a successful season. I picked them to go 6-10, 6.5 Vegas. They already got the 0.5. So, it's not a successful season if we have to fire Matt Patricia, if we have to fire Bob Quinn, if we have to rebuild this team after just 2 years of trial, and we found out it was an error, it's not a successful season. So in order for it to be a successful season, we have to play good enough football to keep on the path that we chose a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. I think they need to come out and show that what they're trying to build, Patricia and Quinn, that it is viable, and keep it alive, because you're absolutely right. If we have to go through another regime change, and things have to change, we end up changing the whole house. I think it certainly creates, creates a void of, an era of uncertainty, because obviously whoever you're going to bring in as your new GM or your new head coach, they're going to have their own philosophies and things like that. So you're going to have to sort of build the roster around what they are looking for. It would be a whole mess. I don't want to see that happen. So that just means that, here's one of the games where Matt Patricia and the Lions have a chance to show, the team, Martha Ford, that what they're building can work, and it's really going to come down to their play today. As we talked about, I think they have a very good chance, and we, of course, are getting kind of ahead of ourselves looking at some of the future weeks, but, I think it is important, because even though this is only going to be the second week of the season, there's only 16 games you get a year, Joe. So each one does count. It is very important, even these early games. There's still plenty of time for things to change and to improve and all that. But it is, we talked about it. The most important thing for the Lions was to get off to a strong start this season. They sort of got off to a neutral start with that tie. It didn't hurt them. It didn't help them. Here in week 2, they definitely need to respond against the Chargers. It should be a pretty good environment down there at Ford Field, so they should have the fans behind them, and hopefully they can come out here and prove us right for our pick'em choice, Joe, and go with the Lions. And just taking a look at chat, I know there are a number of things. Joe, want to get your take on Jeff's question here about whether or not you would consider a good season the Lions going 9-6-1 and missing the playoffs. Obviously, that's better than the 6-10 mark. Well, I guess they're 0.5 hit. So the 6-10 mark where you were projecting them. How would you feel about a 9-6-1 record for the Lions at the end of the season?
I think that'd be a successful season for the Detroit Lions. Missing the playoffs at 9-6-1, I don't really see that happening. I think that's enough to get them into the wild card. I think what we see in the NFC division or conference is, a few elite teams. I think there's going to be really competitive football all throughout the NFC this year. Going to create more losses for these teams, not as many powerhouses. So 9-6-1 is definitely a positive season for the Detroit Lions. It tells me Patricia can have a winning season. It tells me the Lions are moving in the right direction. And if by chance they do miss the playoffs, I would still say it's a successful season because it's a winning record.
Certainly, certainly. I think I had the Lions at the 8-8 mark. So for me too, obviously that's a success. It shows that they are capable. And really, Joe, we've talked about it in past weeks where a lot of the teams in the league have improved year over year. They've brought in people, and the Lions are in that boat. We think they've honestly made their team, their roster better. It's just a matter of what sort of outcomes they can generate, and that's where that any given Sunday thing comes in. Even though your roster is better than it was last year, you know, uh, really the games decide themselves. So you got to kind of look at it from a week to week perspective in that regard, and it will be interesting to see what happens. Um, Most certainly. So we'll have to see how things go. And from my perspective, the other thing I'm interested in here, and a question I have for you, Joe, is so let's say the Lions win this game, and they make it through without Taylor Decker, and let's say that whoever they have filling in for Taylor Decker doesn't look particularly inspired. Their play is still kind of We're still feeling that left tackle spot is something where we need to find a fix. In my opinion, I think that the Lions should go ahead at that point in time. I know they've already been having some discussions with Washington about Trent Williams, their star left tackle. At that point in time, if we beat the Chargers and things are still not looking real great, I want the Lions to go all in and do everything they can to get Trent Williams from Washington. He's 31 years old, so he's not going to be like your long-term fix there, but he's one of the best left tackles in the game. If you think that you can win with this Lions team, and if you have getting a win against the Chargers record-wise, you're still very much in it. I think at that point in time, if the left tackle play is still looking as poor as it was in Week 1, I say go out and get Trent Williams, Joe. But are you in that same line of thought where if it is looking bad, that they need to do whatever they can do to fill what will probably is maybe our biggest need on the team at the moment?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the Lions generally have high draft picks. They have good draft picks in positioning for like where to choose in the draft. But I'm generally not a fan of picking a player third, fourth, fifth, sixth round. First and second. Sometimes they develop into good starters. Very rarely are these superstars. But the Lions just have a bad history of utilizing all their draft picks that they have. So I wouldn't be opposed to trading draft picks to get a game changer, solid, a star left tackle. Like, that's something the Lions have never really had. Jeff Backus was average. He had good games, but he had a lot of bad games. Taylor Decker, we thought was a good pick. He was picked in the first couple of rounds, and he's had average, good games and bad games. But to get a consistently effective left tackle is definitely going to be a huge upgrade, and it's worth the draft picks or maybe the talent that the Lions, with that and some draft picks, would have to give up to get him. So, yeah, if it's an area of concern after this game, I would definitely start to address it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's kind of that age-old question of, would you rather have a player who's a sure thing and a veteran like Trent Williams who's already proven himself, or is it better to hold on to the potential value of yet to be named players that you draft? And I think in the Lions case, obviously, I think on both sides of the equation, which might give fans a little pause, is that the Lions have brought in some established veterans who haven't necessarily panned out, and they've had draft picks that haven't necessarily panned out. And of course, that's always something that's going to be there. That's not unique to the Lions. That's a thing every team struggles with. Sometimes you make moves with the best of intentions, and it just doesn't work out. But I think with Trent Williams, everything that has come out of Washington about him is that he's healthy, in the best shape of his career. I don't think Taylor Decker is awful, but by all means, if what it takes to get Trent Williams out of Washington is Taylor Decker and a draft pick, then yeah, I'm willing to do that for the player who may be the best left tackle in the NFL. And I don't think there's been a point during the entire time I've been, alive where the Lions have had, whether it's the left tackle or anywhere on the offensive line, one of the best linemen in the NFL. That just hasn't happened. So, if it is a possibility, again, if we win this game and things still are sketchy there at the left tackle spot, I think it's important because not only can it help stabilize that offensive line, I think it'll also help ensure that Matthew Stafford stays healthy throughout the season because, Joe, we've talked about it looking at that backup QB spot. Josh Johnson played pretty well in the preseason, but if Stafford goes down, that's the season. And we know he's already coming off that back injury from last year, and there were some whispers that it might still be going on this season. He needs to be protected, especially on that blind side, because if he takes a shot and that back injury reappears, it's gonna hurt the Lions team. So yeah, I think it's worth going after and pursuing. It's just a matter of whether or not Washington can, we can work something out with Washington. But I'm all in on it. I like the idea. It'd be great to see, but we'll have to see what happens here with the Lions moving forward. So yeah, it's where are we at now? We're at 12:45. You got 15 minutes until the kickoff. Just want to thank everybody who's been here chatting. I know chat's been very active. A lot of our fellow members in the Gridiron, our fantasy football league there, chatting it up. Jeff, thank you. My dad, Katie as well. And Jeff, I will point out, I did see when you did call yourself the Patriots of our fantasy football league, the sort of exemplary team, if you will, in there. I will point out that the Patriots have in fact won Super Bowls, and I don't see your name on the trophy. So that's kind of that's not apples to apples, really. So just a little something I noticed there. Do with that as you will.
Started the season with a win too, and not a tie. So
that's true. That's another truth there. So just calling it like I see it. But again, just want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you did enjoy the show, please do help the channel grow. Liking this video helps us out. And then, of course, the big thing you can do to help support us is hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We have a goal to reach 100 subscribers so we can get our custom URL for the channel. Making good progress there, but if you haven't already done so, please consider doing it. It, again, is probably the best way you can help support us at the moment. And then if you want to be kept up to date when we go live with all our videos, we'll be going live tomorrow with our recap of this video. So, Joe, we were already talking about what potentially a win or a loss could mean here for the Lions. We'll be able to revisit that on Monday once we know the outcome of the game, and we can take a look then. But if you want to be alerted when that's happening, make sure you ring the bell as well. YouTube changed their whole algorithm thing so that if you don't ring the bell, you won't get a notification. But if you ring the bell, it'll send a notification to both your desktop and your mobile device, depending on what you're using to check us out here on YouTube. And thanks again for tuning in. We will see you on the other side of the game. Like I said, we'll be back Monday to give you our reactions to the outcome of today's 1 o'clock showdown. And I guess the last thing to say, Joe, is go Lions.
Go Lions!
We'll see you during the next video.